Tonight's White House briefing didn't just get tense, it completely blew up. What started as a simple question from CNN's Caitlin Collins about the deaths of American service members suddenly turned into a stunning live confrontation that left Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt scrambling, deflecting, and visibly rattled. Collins kept pressing, calmly dismantling the talking points, while Leavitt lashed out at the media and tried to change the subject. The result? A moment that felt less like a press briefing and more like a political cage match, and by the end of it, the narrative the administration hoped to control was slipping fast. Stick around, because the clip you're about to see shows exactly how this fiery exchange spiraled into one of the most jaw-dropping press room showdowns we've seen in a long time.
Yesterday, the president acknowledged that oil prices will be a bit high. As for gas prices here in the U.S., what is the admin doing right now to counter that? I mean, should they skyrocket? Is there a plan to help, Americans right now with those higher gas prices? And then a second question, on the rash that was on the president's neck, the White House physician said it was a preventative skin cream that he was using, but why is the president using this cream? What are they trying to prevent with this cream?
To your second question, I don't have anything additional to add to the physician statement that we provided to all of you on those questions, but I know the statement said that the redness on the neck will dissipate within the next couple of weeks. To your first question about oil prices, thank God we have a president who has exuded American energy dominance over the past year, an administration that is wholeheartedly focused on keeping prices stable as best as we can. Of course, this operation is temporary to protect the homeland, but crude oil prices did fall yesterday. They remain stable today after the president announced steps to ensure the stability in global energy markets. Again, those include the DEC offering reasonably priced political risk insurance and the potential for the U.S. Navy to provide protection for the flow of energy through the Strait of Hormuz. It is the president's belief and his economic team's belief that the economy continues to be very strong, it's robust, and will be able to weather any of the temporary impacts of Operation Epic Fury. John.
Tonight's meltdown was impossible to ignore because what started as a routine White House exchange suddenly turned into one of those painfully awkward moments this administration always tries and fails to control. The second Karoline Leavitt was pressed on live television about the visible rash on Trump's neck, the whole polished script seemed to crack and you could almost feel the panic pouring out of the room. Instead of transparency, viewers got the same defensive dodge, the same carefully managed line, and the same desperate attempt to shut down questions before they spiraled into a bigger political embarrassment. But that is exactly why this moment matters. When a White House gets this tense over a simple on-camera question, it usually means the story underneath is a lot bigger than they want the public to see. What made this whole episode so revealing was not just the awkward question about the rash on Trump's neck, but the almost comical level of fragility that instantly filled the room the moment the subject came up, because once again, we were forced to watch the same old Trump world performance. A White House that demands endless attention, endless loyalty, endless praise, but suddenly turns allergic to scrutiny the second anyone asks a direct question that was not pre-approved by the spin team. And right at the center of that performance was Karoline Leavitt doing what Trump loyalists so often do best, wrapping a simple issue in layers of theatrical defensiveness, polished talking points, and artificial outrage, as if the public is too foolish to notice when someone is clearly dodging. That is what makes her role so politically telling. She does not just answer for Trump, she performs the ritual of protecting him from accountability no matter how minor the issue, no matter how absurd the spectacle becomes, and no matter how ridiculous it looks to everyone watching. A visible rash should not be a national drama. Under any normal administration, it would be a 5-second clarification and everyone would move on. But Trump has never allowed anything to be normal because everything around him must be transformed into a loyalty test, a crisis management exercise, or an exercise in narrative control. So when Leavitt tried to calmly smooth over the issue with a vague explanation and a promise that it would fade, what she really exposed was not medical information but the entire operating system of Trumpism: conceal, minimize, dismiss, repeat. And the more tightly controlled the answer sounded, the more obvious it became that the real panic was not about the rash itself, but about the image. That is always the core of it with Trump. Not substance image, not truth optics, not public trust brand preservation. This is a man who has spent years cultivating the mythology of dominance, strength, invincibility, virility, and command, so even the smallest visible sign of human vulnerability becomes in the political universe he built something his team feels compelled to smother under layers of spin. It would almost be funny if it were not so pathetic. Here is a former president and current political giant, a man who wants the country to believe he alone embodies strength, and yet his communications team behaves as though one uncomfortable question about a patch of irritated skin could bring the whole empire crashing down. That is not strength. That is vanity with a press badge standing next to it. And Leavitt, in trying so hard to defend him, only magnified the weakness. Because when a spokesperson cannot answer a straightforward question without sounding like she is guarding the nuclear codes, viewers do not come away reassured. They come away thinking, what exactly are these people so afraid of? That is where the sarcasm practically writes itself. We are expected to believe that Trump is the unstoppable strongman, the fearless wrecking ball, the master dealmaker, the alpha figure who towers over everyone in the room, and yet his orbit goes into full damage control mode over a rash on his neck. It is impossible not to laugh at the contradiction. This entire political brand is built on exaggerated macho theater, and yet it repeatedly collapses under the weight of its own insecurity. And that insecurity spreads outward through people like Leavitt, who speak with absolute confidence while conveying almost none of the transparency that confidence is supposed to represent. She delivered the kind of answer designed not to inform, but to end the conversation, and that is the hallmark of a communication strategy rooted in contempt for the audience. It assumes the public will accept a carefully packaged line stop asking questions and move on to the next outrage. But that strategy works less and less because the pattern is now so familiar. Every question is treated like an attack. Every request for clarity is treated like a hostile act. Every visible inconsistency is buried under rehearsed indignation, and Trump, far from rising above that pettiness, depends on it. He thrives in an environment where truth is always negotiable, where image management replaces honesty, and where loyal surrogates treat basic public scrutiny as if it were some kind of moral crime. That is why this moment landed the way it did. It was not really about a rash. It was about the deeper absurdity of a political machine that markets power while radiating insecurity, that talks constantly about toughness while requiring constant babysitting from media defenders, and that demands trust while refusing even the most ordinary transparency. Trump looked once again like a man trapped inside a performance of his own making, desperate to appear unbothered, even as everyone around him behaves like a small crack in the facade could turn into a political earthquake. And Leavitt looked like what she too often is in these moments, not a truth teller, not even a particularly persuasive advocate, but a highly disciplined custodian of a manufactured image that grows harder to maintain every time reality intrudes. The irony is that by trying so aggressively to control a tiny story, they made it feel larger, stranger, and more politically embarrassing than it ever needed to be. That is the Trump formula in miniature. Inflate the mythology, fear, the facts dispatch the spokesperson, act insulted, reveal more weakness than strength, and then pretend the public did not just witness the whole thing unravel in real time.